This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former House member Gene Arnold from Nash County, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, and Elaine Mejia with the North Carolina Justice Center. Well, this week we're going to talk about our lasting opinions of the Easley hearings and letting the prisoners go free, so let's get started. Now that we've had a chance to let our impressions from the Mike Easley hearing settle a little bit, let's talk about what the State Board of Elections said, what this means for the former governor, how this is going to proceed, and what reforms, if any, might result from the hearings. Question one is to Chris. Were you surprised that the State Board of Elections unanimously recommended the case to the district attorney?
I was a little surprised that Bob Cordell voted for it, given the way he was performing during the process. He seemed to want to support, I think, Governor Easley at every turn, but it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to recommend this to the district attorney. In fact, former Governor Easley knew they were going to, and I think as a public relations move, asked them to the day before they made their recommendation, which was smart PR. Now we can sort of say that he wanted his own name cleared. There's a million things to talk about. I know we're going to get into it. One of the most fascinating is that Wake County District Attorney Colin Willoughby is a close friend of Easley, so now the case is going to be prosecuted by the Rowan County prosecutor, or investigated. We don't know if it'll be prosecuted. But no, this was a foregone conclusion.
Well, that's pretty much our show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
All right, let's get into some of this. The State Board of Elections, basically, Elaine was saying they didn't believe the governor, right?
Well, I mean, there were two very distinct, testimonies presented. So, I mean, a couple of moments there, they were so contradicted that somebody has to be lying. So that warrants further investigation. The other thing I think we should talk about is the very small step forward, but also what a huge opportunity they missed to really crack down on the parties and the earmarking of funds. And they took a very narrow view of that, and I think that was unfortunate. Well,
let's talk about that a little bit. The State Democratic Party came out saying that they were exonerated, that they were found free and clear, guilty, nothing of any consequences.
You know, Tom, they were walking by. Just happened to be walking by, and someone stuffed some money
in
their pocket, and they didn't know where it came from, and they didn't know what to do with it, so they walked along with it.
So they wrote Mike Easley's name on it.
They put out this press release, and of course all the major news outlets in the state just basically quoted what they said. Bob Hall with Democracy North Carolina came back this week and said, hey, time out here. They weren't absolved of any problems so far as designated giving, right?
That's what he argued. I think it's an important issue to look at how the party was treated by the state board, but ultimately this was not really an investigation of the state party. They didn't look for a pattern of lots of other examples of this. Perhaps that exists, perhaps it doesn't. That's not what the board was looking at. They were looking at Mike Easley and the state party's role as it pertained to Mike Easley, and the focus was obviously on the governor. I just have to say, by the way, that any competent defense attorney would have told Governor Easley not to go before the committee and start answering questions. Now, I assume that Tommy Hicks, who is the attorney that he eventually went through several, I think, but eventually got to Mr. Hicks, who used to work for Mr. Easley, I'm sure he gave him that advice. The governor is, of course, a horrible client, and his performance at the State Board of Election was an absolute catastrophe. I was shocked at the reaction of some of the observers saying, oh, he's did a great job, and he was awful. He was obviously incredible. He made testimony that was unbelievable. It contradicted the documents. The governor just dug himself a huge hole, jumped in,
and he's on the record
the
with
whole
it.
time.
And he's on the record with it.
I have to disagree with that because I think.
Now wait a minute, you are going to support a Democrat.
No, I'm going.
I want to hear this.
I'm going to simply say that I think the governor outdumbed the entire Board of Elections group, and as far as the public is concerned, I think they perceive that Easley didn't do anything. He answered the questions except for the one comment that it just didn't happen, and I think the perception is going to be that Easley didn't do anything.
Perception by whom now? I want to make sure.
Well, I'm talking about from the public standpoint. But all of this, to me, has been an open window to how politics are done, how the money is funded, and the big givers that go through the party has been this way forever. There won't be any changes because the legislature will do whatever they have to do to get reelected.
Because the inmates are in charge of the asylum.
The inmates have been in charge.
And they don't want to change this. The business about Ruffin Poole, who was the governor's lead counsel during his time in office, sought to quash the subpoena to get him to testify. He got retired Judge Henry Burnett to agree to quash the subpoena. Now it got unquashed by the State Court of Appeals on the Friday that the verdict was released. What's up with that, Chris? What's
well, I don't know.
the
most none of that surprised me really, except that the order was sealed. We still don't know why. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. There's a part of this that's been sealed. We don't know why he wasn't forced to testify. There's a lot of speculation about whether it's a federal investigation, whether he didn't want to reveal any information before the board. Who knows? I hope that we get to the bottom of this at some point. It was one of the more mysterious sort of sidebars of the whole event.
Elaine, he threw two former friends and supporters under the bus, McQueen Campbell and Lanny Wilson.
There's nothing like official testimony to break up a good friendship. But I don't, I think that's how these things happen.
But that's another reason why it was a disaster to put the governor on the stand. Having testified, the only possible defense he really had was to attack these other people who may become witnesses. I mean, in other words, the defense has already telegraphed all they're going to do. To compare the governor's credibility against McQueen Campbell, I'm sure that the governor thought he could win that debate. The problem is that McQueen Campbell's story had documentation.
Yeah, but McQueen Campbell's not, he does have documentation, but I'm not sure he's the most credible witness. He was doing a lot of the same things. I mean, he himself is under investigation.
And we understand he's been granted immunity.
Right.
That's the point.
Right. But it also means that it gives the defense an opportunity to question McQueen Campbell very pointedly and find out what he did. I think Easley's big claim, which is sort of ironic as we talk about on this show, is that he didn't know anything. He didn't know anything about what was going on anywhere. He didn't know what was going on in his campaign. He didn't know what was going on. I mean, that's his defense.
That was part of what I found incredible, though, Chris, is that he said he didn't know, but then when it came down to particular conversations, he remembered them vividly.
This is the
problem. He was vacuuming out his fireplace and got soot all over it.
I don't know, except when it's convenient.
Had to hang up.
Any politician that's been in office for 16 years, like Easley has been, is professional enough that he's not going to get himself hooked onto any of this. And friends, McQueen Campbell was a neophyte trying to play with the big dogs, and it just doesn't happen.
We're not through with this subject. We're going to come back and talk some more about it after these messages. Stay with us.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Listen to what Farm Bureau members are saying.
Farm Bureau is a great organization. They've helped us a lot. Anytime you can take, a row crop farm from Northampton, a dairyman from Iredale, and a tree farm from Watauga, speaking in one voice, that's North Carolina Farm Bureau.
For over 70 years, Farm Bureau has been the voice for North Carolina farmers in our nation's capital. Farm Bureau and agriculture, we keep North Carolina growing.
Closed captioning of NC Spin is provided by Capital Bank, service worth talking about.